I got a long journey ahead of me. I went out somewhere yesterday. I forgot to do something at my destination yesterday, so I had to go back. Some meathead. Rather, because I'm not a meathead. If I'm meathead, I would just had one thing on my mind the whole time, and that'd be my focus. Do this one thing here. So, got to go back. So I'll do some traveling. You know, there's so many people filled with so much despair on the internet. I wonder how much of it is genuine and how much of it is like COINTELPRO and how much of it is like bot generated. When we talk about like the ever expansive technocratic state and this new revelations, this is an Italian company that sets up these RFID like sniffers in different places, and it just got a software update, and basically what it can do is if your car goes by, it can detect your cell phone, detect any Bluetooth apparatus in your car, any Wi-Fi apparatus in your car, the transmissions from your tire pressure sensors. If you're wearing any RFID tags, it can read those, like, and it can create basically a footprint of where you're going, who you are and where you're going. And then law enforcement can later access that if they're trying to track you down or connect you with some kind of crime or whatever. And people think, oh, you have nothing to hide, and blah, blah, blah. Look, I'm not going to rehash that argument, okay? I'm just going to say it's ridiculous, it's evil, and there could be a time and a place for that kind of technology, assuming we lived amongst people who weren't incredibly authoritarian, but we do, so here we are. And people think it's, you know, oh, the beast system's undefeatable. We need Jesus to save us. Now, I'm not going to tell you to not ask for divine assistance. I'll accept divine assistance if Jesus Christ wants to come down and help us out, bring an army of spiritual creatures, these angels. Yeah, that'd be fine. I'd be glad of that if that happened. But these problems are ours to solve. Right? And here's the thing. You get overwhelmed, and I get overwhelmed, and I understand it because we are domesticated. Okay, we are nearly 100% dependent on the very thing which is getting on our nerves. So how do you rebel against the thing that you're dependent upon, right? How do you bite the hand that feeds you? You have to build something else, one little step at a time. It could be something as simple as learning what wild nuts that fall from trees that you can eat in the autumn, when the nuts fall off the trees. Like step one, so that you can start getting some meals, you know, whatever. You eat 3 meals a day, 3 times 365 days a year. That's a lot of meals, right? But okay, maybe you can just get a few of those meals from the nuts. All right, and you get a few meals from the wild, I don't know, greens that you can eat, and a few from the wild roots you can find, right? And then, I don't know, you learn how to hunt small game, whatever, all right? You learn how to grow some potatoes. Okay? You start getting your water not just from the tap. Maybe you learn to collect and purify some water. Maybe you don't have the apparatus to do it full time, but maybe you have enough apparatus you can put together to purify, you know, each day a gallon of water. You know, humans need more than a gallon on a normal day, but maybe you could find a way to purify a gallon of water every day on your own effort. That gives you some degree of independence, does it not? Sure it does. All right. So, baby steps, and we're going to have to start with the basic stuff because most of us do not have the skills to survive outside the political and economic system we live in. But once you start building it, one step at a time, eventually you have something that's separate, something worth leaning on, something worth defending because it's yours. You're not renting it from the state or from some corporation. Okay? Then you have something to fight for. Now, if you're used to not having to put that kind of work into living, I get it. It seems like a lot, and maybe it's easier just to submit to, you know, totalitarianism. Okay, if that's your choice, who am I to tell you not to submit to it? Right? It's your soul's journey. If you want to submit to, you know, the total corporate technocratic state, that's your business. But it's not insurmountable. And I've said in previous videos, and I'll say it again, this thing that I call the beast system, because I have a Christian cultural background, it is 90% bark and 10% bite. Now, when it bites, it's incredibly intimidating, okay? We can see the wars that are waged, the kind of weapons they use. You know, when the U.S. government went into Venezuela, you know, several months back and captured their president, they used these sonic weapons that seemed to disable his guards. Right, and they can use, you know, cell phone metadata to target specific people with, you know, rocket strikes and so on. Like, this is very high-tech stuff. It's very powerful stuff. Okay, but they can only knock out individuals and small groups. Okay, dealing with millions of people who are just non-compliant. They're not even combatants. Just non-compliant is not what they're equipped to do. A bunch of people are just going to disobey you, and if you come in with force, they may just crush you, right? If you know, whatever. If you have, you know, let's say you have a town where like 1,000 people in town are living off their gardens, and you try to squash their gardens, they're all gonna pile onto you. You're gonna have to bring like a small like brigade of troops, a large brigade of troops. I mean, if you want to take down 1,000 people who are growing gardens, you're gonna need thousands of troops to do that. Otherwise, they're just going to swarm you, right? And, you know, how many Americans really are who even work for the state want to actually bring arms to bear against their neighbor who are just, what, growing gardens or something, right? I know it sounds like an absurd scenario, but I'm just telling you, like, the agents of the beast system, they have costs. You know, they have to find out, is this worth enforcing? Is it worth doing, all right? People stood up to the Soviet Union, within the Soviet Union, and forced it to back down at times. When there's enough disobedience, and then the people get sufficiently angry and then cooperative with each other, then the state has to back down. Now they might call the bluff, right? They might call, what's hypothetical? Let's go back to 1,000 gardens, okay? The state could come in with and carpet bomb a town because they're growing gardens. I don't know, under some pretense. I don't know what the pretense would be, all right? They could do that. They could totally level the town. But generally speaking, they're not going to deploy that kind of force against people growing gardens. And yes, this is all within the realm of probabilities, not certainties, okay? It could be that, guess what, we get a mad dictator who is insistent on everyone doing it his or her way, and they might carpet bomb your community gardens so that you have to depend on the state or corporate distribution system, like the, you know, very explicit. No, this just tends not to be how they function. They may make it onerous. They may get regulatory inspectors and rely on, you know, homeowners associations, HOAs, and their myriad of regulations to try to strangle it out. But generally, directly coming at you is not going to work. And if a bunch of people are willing to disobey even the regulatory apparatus, then the state can back down. Okay, so I want to tell you that despite all this surveillance and stuff, okay, let's talk about this. We got to talk about cars, and we got to talk about community, okay? I'll tell you right now, one of the great things of living in America that I do like is if you have money in your pocket and a functioning car, you can pack up and go anywhere you want in the 48 contiguous states. You've had enough of anything. Your job, you can just, you know, no show, quit your job and drive away and move somewhere else. Okay, you don't have to worry about packing up your stuff, scheduling a train, put your stuff on the train goes to such destination. You don't have to do that, you just go. Okay, and, you know, I think about the song by James Brown, you know, Living in America, when he sings all about all the different cities you visit while driving across America and listen to the radio as you go, and it's really like, he loved it, right? And other people have written about, you know, songs about driving along Route 66 or whatever, you know, driving here, driving there. there's a good thing to that. Okay, that personal mobility. You also have your personal space. You can have your private conversations with, you know, in your car with your whoever's with you or whatnot. You can even record your podcasts, right? Negative side of that is, of course, the high expense of travel, right? Everyone has to pay for the maintenance of their car. Instead of pooling your train fees or your bus fees to maintain just a few vehicles, everybody has to maintain their own vehicle or more than one vehicle, right? And that's expensive. And also, people become rootless. They just pack up and move. Well, one of the positive sides of being more difficult to travel is that people have to try to make where they live work for them and invest effort into where they live to make it a place they want to live, and to fight for what they believe in where they live. You can't just pack up and leave. And so we have a culture where we all just kind of live next to strangers for the most part. Yeah, you might nod and wave at each other if you're polite, but like a bunch of people don't like each other. You don't talk about anything of substance. You're trying to avoid conflict. Really, it's kind of soulless, you know. I grew up in a town that you would call a bedroom community, and I don't mean like it's literally community. It's just a term for a place where people sleep, but there's really nothing going on there. And I moved a few times, but now I've lived in this town I've lived in for almost 20 years. Actually, it's been 20 years, and it was 14 years there before I actually felt like I belonged. And then I finally felt like I belonged. It became my home. And I'll be really grieved if I ever have to move out. And it's a place to put down roots. My roots are weak, but they are roots. And being a people who are rooted in a time and a place is nice. To have a genuine culture. You know, a lot of people travel, they like to visit the culture of different places, but how many people actually want to be part of the culture of a place? I think about people who travel all the time, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that. But I would ask you the rhetorical question: what is so wrong with where you live that you have to be away from it all the time? And is that something you could fix? Is that something you could make better? Just food for thought. So we become rootless and disconnected from our neighbors. And so we have this growing surveillance state, and we have, you know, supposedly there's going to be artificial intelligence surveillance and new automobiles starting in 2027, which is going to be, you know, a bit of a nightmare for anyone who values their autonomy, their privacy, their sovereignty. Surveillance cameras everywhere. The powers that be don't want you driving around. And if you're going to drive around, they want to make sure only the most loyal subjects of the state and the corporate system are going to be operating vehicles. The people who are comfortable with AI in their car, because they have nothing to hide, so why wouldn't they want it in their car? La la la, it keeps me safe. La la la, okay. That sort of thing. And yeah, pretty much shutting down the American car culture, slowly strangling it out, making cars very, very expensive to buy, expensive to maintain. Inflation is wiping out the purchasing power for a lot of people. I was just in Concord, New Hampshire today. I just passed, went by Bank Chevrolet, and they had a truck there, a pickup truck for like $82,000. We go, oh my gosh, you used to be able to get a mortgage for a house not too long ago for that. In my town, back in like 06, 07, there was houses for sale for like $60,000 or $70,000. Now you can get a pickup truck for that much money. It's ridiculous. Okay. Where am I going with this? The silver lining of the effort to make travel difficult and all the surveillance is that people can form real, genuine interpersonal connections now. Like, if you don't want to be surveilled, then you got to get rid of the cell phone, right? You got to put it away. At least, leave it at home or put it in a Faraday bag on airplane mode or something like that. You need to keep it off so you can't be surveilled. In fact, because there might be recording tech on it, you probably should go around without that device, right? Even take the battery out if you can. When not using it, ideally. Right, and avoiding all, surveillance, no more Siri, no more Alexa, none of that stuff, right? Get all the personal assistant robots out of your house, out of where you are, and meet in person with your friends or your acquaintances and talk about things and decide how you want to handle your affairs. And so the beast system is forcing the people who are most conscientious about their personal freedom, their sovereignty, their privacy, to start working together outside of the surveillance system. Now, I understand a lack of a data footprint is a footprint in itself. All right, so what? So what? So, people forming real local networks, walking more, bicycling more, right? And so yeah, there was a totalitarian move to push people into the cities where they can be surveilled, right, and contained. But on the other hand, there could be plenty of local communities outside the city where people just not use high technology anymore. They use a lot of just basic technology. If they don't actually need the tech, they don't use it, and they use it only for as long as they need it, and they turn it off. Like, if it turns out, and this is all interrelated, you can't just say, oh, it's about this surveillance tech, it's about that surveillance tech. There's an intersectionality to all this technocratic, this push to surveil and control everything, to turn, the things you used to own into a renter's fee and so on, okay? The people who are most loyal to the system will be happy with it, and the people who aren't will drop out and start working together, okay? And the system is not invincible. In fact, the more they tighten their grip, the more people are going to start dropping out. To various extent. You may have 1 foot in and 1 foot out of the system. Like, for example, if they require us to show ID to log into the internet, which could happen, right? And I take care of a handicapped person, then probably the only time I'll be on the internet is when I do my work and log my work as a caretaker of a handicapped person, and then I just won't use the internet. Now, I love using the computers, and I love being able to do all the research and even, get on YouTube and all that stuff. But if I have to go without in the interest of my sovereignty, okay, it will be hard. It will be difficult. I've gotten the habit of doing certain things, right, and I have to change my habits. But it is possible to change habits, however difficult, right? Just how some people used to eating, lots of bread and spiking their blood sugar, decide, okay, I'm gonna stop eating so much in the way of starchy foods and allow my, my blood sugar to drop and allow the ketones to kick in to burn fat. Now, I'm not giving you medical advice. I'm just saying that's something people do. It's difficult, right? If you're used to eating, every couple hours, or eating bread all the time, or eating sugar all the time, it's difficult to get out of that mode, but it can be done. Just you can get away from, turning to your phone every time you're bored and using it as a fidget device. You fidget with something else, right? Whatever, a squishy thing like this, you can squish it, or whatever, doodle on a doodle pad, whatever, pitch pennies at the wall, count dots on the wall, daydream, whatever, So my point is that the system is not invincible. In fact, the more people depend on the tech, the more tech runs people's lives, the more vulnerable it becomes, because when the tech fails, all the people will not know what to do with themselves. There are people out there who are beginning to let AI do their thinking for them. Now, it's one thing to be someone who uses generative AI to collect data, to explore a few ideas and so on. I've done that. You can use it in a certain way without sacrificing your intellectual powers. But other people, like, it's kind of like using Google Maps or Waze or any of those other navigation, those GPS programs. If you use it enough for places that you already know how to go, before long, like, your powers of navigation get weaker. Now, you can resurrect them if you already had them, but your powers of navigation get weaker. Just like if you never do mental arithmetic and you're always using a calculator for basic mathematics, then your ability to do arithmetic may get weaker too, right? Depends on the person. So, imagine people just relying on artificial intelligence for so many of their decisions, just obeying whatever the state tells them, whatever the corporate AI tells them, whatever, and it fails. Maybe there's a power shortage. Power goes out, there's an accident, there's a storm, there's civil unrest, whatever. Maybe there's electromagnetic pulse from coronal mass ejection. And maybe we're talking about, we're due for another pole reversal, so as the magnetic poles move, the magnetic field gets weaker, more of that electrical radiation will get through and scramble electrical stuff. Like, that could be a serious problem. The people who are not plugged into it as much will be more resilient. So if it's a waiting game, if it's a question of just outlasting the beast system, then yeah, it's gonna get fried. Sooner or later, it's gonna fry. And how the heck do they expect, like, building all these data centers? We don't have a corresponding increase in the number of power stations being built. So it means human beings have to go out more and more and more and more. Like, the same thing that people want to submit to. If you're gonna have to use your cell phone to do all your commerce, right? Well, how are you supposed to charge it if you don't have electricity? So we have a frail electrical grid, not enough generation, not enough capacity to carry all the electricity needed. So the thing's going to burn itself out. There's no way to fix it. So, yeah, it's intimidating and miserable in the short term. I'm talking a couple decades, probably, which sucks because I'm old. I'd like to live to see the end of it, but whatever. If I'm lucky to live a couple decades more, I'll be in my late 60s, and I can watch the beast system go up in smoke. Or maybe I'll die before I get there. That's another thing to think about. Like, what are you worried about? Are you particularly worried about the system, rounding you up and executing you? Okay, that is possible. Do recognize, though, that we're all headed for the dirt nap sooner or later. Okay, whether the system, the political economic system, eliminates you directly as an anomaly they can't tolerate, or you die of old age, the destination is death. And from my point of view, and I'm not going to foist it on you, there is an existence beyond this. This is, this life is this life, but your life, your consciousness continues past it. Something to keep in mind. There's a reason to be courageous. There's a reason to be hopeful, because the nightmare that is human institutions in this world, it will pass, and we do get to escape it. We get to escape after we die and build something else. Do something else with this amazing eternal consciousness we have. So I hope I spoke some hope into you with this meandering little monologue. I don't think anyone's going to watch it. I think my channel's been choked out. But if you find it beneficial, I'm glad. Thanks for watching.